Today I'm going to show you how to make a dinner recipe that is absolutely perfect for fall, and that is apple cider sage pork chops. The pork chops are first brined in a simple apple cider solution, seared until golden in browned butter, and then cooked with fresh apples and sage for a dinner that's impressive on the table, yet incredibly easy to make. Now, unfortunately, pork chops have a bad reputation for being dry and flavorless, but I can assure you that this recipe is the exact opposite of that. They're juicy, flavorful, and cooked to perfection, and an extra drizzle of the sweet sauce and tender apples is perfect over a side of mashed potatoes. So, let me show you how to make them. Pork chops are naturally lean and prone to drying out when cooked, so today's recipe starts with making a really simple brine, which helps to add moisture and flavor while making the meat juicy and tender. So if you want the best pork chops, don't skip this step. Add 2 cups of water along with a 1/4 cup of kosher salt, 4 peeled garlic cloves, 4 sage leaves, and a tablespoon of whole black peppercorns to a pot. Give that a stir to mix everything together, and then bring the mixture to a boil so that the salt can dissolve and the aromatics can infuse the water. Once it's boiling, remove it from the heat and let it cool to room temperature. Then you'll add 2 cups of apple cider. Apple cider is similar to apple juice, but it's raw and unprocessed, which is why it looks a bit cloudier. I like to add chilled apple cider from the fridge as it helps to cool down the brine even faster. So once the brine is fully cooled, you can get your pork chops out. I'm using 4 bone-in pork chops, and mine happen to be extra large from the butcher today. Now there's always debate on if you should buy bone-in or boneless pork chops, so I detail out a few reasons for my personal preference of bone-in chops on the full recipe blog post. To brine the chops, you can add them to a large bowl, glass Pyrex dish, or sealable bag, and then you'll just pour the cooled brine on top. Again, you want to make sure the brine is fully cooled so that you don't accidentally start cooking them. I try to brine for a couple of hours before cooking, but even 30 minutes makes a drastic difference in creating tastier chops. And you just want to make sure that the chops are fully covered in liquid before covering the bowl and letting them hang out in the fridge for a couple of hours. Now, here's a big mistake most people make after they're done brining. They don't rinse the meat. The salt and flavor will infuse into the pork chops, and you don't want to let all that salt sit on the surface. If you do, you'll have extra salty chops. So remove your chops from the brine and then give them a quick rinse under the faucet. Then use a few paper towels to pat them completely dry. Making sure they're completely dry will help them get that golden crust in the pan. So once you've rinsed and patted dry all of your chops, just set them on a plate and let them come back to room temperature for about 10 to 15 minutes. And while they're coming to room temperature, you can quickly prep a couple of ingredients for the pan. The first is a shallot, and you'll want to finely dice that. Now, I say 1 shallot on the recipe, but shallots can vary quite a bit in size. This is a large single bulb with 2 cloves, and I'm a fan of a lot of shallot, so that works for me. If you're grabbing individual small shallot cloves at the market, you might want to grab 2. And once that's finely diced, just add it to a bowl. Fresh sage adds tons of flavor to this recipe, and you'll want to finely chop several leaves to make about 2 teaspoons worth of finely chopped sage. If you don't have fresh sage, you'll want to use a little bit more than half a teaspoon of dried sage. And once that's all chopped up, add that to another small bowl. Lastly, peel 1 crisp apple. I'm actually using a Honeycrisp apple today, but Gala apples work great as well. You just want a variety that's on the sweeter side, not tart side. Once your apple is peeled, core it if you have a corer. I don't, so I'm just using my knife to remove the stem and seeds. Then thinly slice it and add it to a bowl to take over to the stove. All right, it's time to cook up some pork chops. Add 1 tablespoon of avocado oil to a cast iron pan over medium-high heat, and add 1 tablespoon of butter. Now you can see that I accidentally added 2 tablespoons right here, and that's because there are 2 spots in this recipe where you add butter to the pan, and one time you add 1 tablespoon and the other time you add 2 tablespoons, and I accidentally flip-flopped them. But it's not a biggie, the recipe turns out either way. I just mention it because you guys have eagle eyes, and I know you'll call me out for adding 2 tablespoons of butter here when the online recipe says 1. Once your butter has melted into the oil and it's bubbly and shimmering, add the pork chops to the pan. Now, as I previously mentioned, my pork chops are gigantic today, so it's like playing a game of Tetris to get them all to fit in the pan. But I'm gonna make them fit. Cook the pork chops for 3 to 4 minutes on the first side, then use tongs to flip them over and cook them another 3 to 4 minutes on the other side until they're golden and browned. And see, now that I flipped them, it's like playing a new game of Tetris all over again to get this last pork chop to fit, but I think I can squeeze it in. Once they've cooked on this side, remove them to a plate and then cover them with aluminum foil to keep them warm while you quickly whip up the pan sauce. Reduce the heat a little bit to medium and add another tablespoon of butter, or if you're following the written recipe, 2 tablespoons of butter, and 1 tablespoon of coconut sugar, which adds sweetness and a lovely caramel-like flavor. Mix those together to combine them with the other juices in the pan, and then add the sliced apples. Use the spatula to stir the apples around the pan for about 2 to 3 minutes or until they're just starting to soften and take on a bit of color. But you don't want to overcook them to the point of falling apart. Add the diced shallot and sage, gently stir those around for another minute, and then add 1 cup of apple cider and 2 teaspoons of Dijon mustard, which adds just a little spicy depth of flavor. Stir that again until it's all mixed together, and then move the apples out of the way a bit so that you can add the pork chops back into the pan to warm them up. If you have normal-sized pork chops, you'll probably have a lot more free space in the pan than what I have. But either way, you want to add some of those apples to the top of the pork chops, and then spoon the hot browned butter and sweetened apple cider sage sauce all over the pork chops until they're fully cooked through to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can use an instant read thermometer to double check the temperature. Before serving, I like to add a few more fresh sage leaves to the pan as garnish, and of course, spoon lots and lots of sauce all over the pork chops because it's the most deliciously sweet liquid. Pork chops are a nice break from your weeknight chicken or a steak dinner, and the flavors in this recipe are particularly worthy of a prime spot on a holiday table. As I mentioned at the beginning, the sauce from this recipe is delicious drizzled over mashed potatoes or any kind of vegetable mash, though I'm just plating them up individually today so that I can dig in because the sweet smell of apples and sage is making me hungry. I also know it's hard to see on video when I cut into the pork chop, but I promise you that the meat is so incredibly juicy, it's just oozing with flavor. I hope you guys enjoy this recipe, and if you do, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with your family and friends, and I will see you again in the next video.